So hey, what's up, thrift fam? So welcome to yet another edition of the Thrift Store Prepper. And what are we going to be talking about in today's episode is a little bit more about sensi prepping and maybe a little bit more about what the Thrift Store Prepper is doing this, or how I came to be doing all this, and how I kind of developed this little sensi prepping method that I'm going to talk a little bit more about you. So little bit more about myself and why I kind of do this. I think I may have mentioned on quite a few occasions in the videos that nobody used to watch, but in the recent days and since the excitement that happened last Wednesday, I made a few more videos for you all that you seem to be watching, and quite a few of you seem to be going through the back catalogue in my playlists and catching up on some of my more previous content, excuse me. I've not long been up, and at the back end of an exhausting week, this is my first day off, and I'm actually still in my gym jams and not planning on much today. But I'm going to bring you this little video to bring it kind of back to the prep in nature and the dollar store and the Dollarama, yada yada, bing bing, whoopie woo kind of stuff. As we did step away a little bit in the recent days from some of the more regular content that we do on the thrift store prepper and the stuff that I like to bring to you, and the pantry builds and the recipes and stuff like that. We're going to be bringing you a lot more of that in the future, but as we have a new audience, and what brought that new audience here, I thought I'd try and scratch the surface with some new content and whet the appetites and test the waters to see what works and what doesn't work. But we're going to go back to basics in the pantry, and this is my pantry here, that if no one's seen it or caught up on any of that kind of content yet, let's have a little look at what I got. So excuse me for the poor video view. I'm using my phone that is attached to a Catholic candle with a rubber band and is currently perched upon a storage tub. Now, something I'm probably going to invest a little bit in is maybe one of those selfie stick tripod type things, so it's going to give me a little bit of freedom and options on camera angles. As I said, I started this kind of whole thing on a little bit of a Women of Prayer and Indiana Jones in it, in the sense that I make shit up as I go along and MacGyvering stuff in order to make the videos, as my little camera tripod setup type thing will suggest. It's very basic, very simple, just using stuff that is around the house, and that's a little bit of the thrift store prepper philosophy. So let's have a little look at the pantry, and excuse me if there's a little bit of a mess going on. I've got to do some chores and tidying before I go back to work in 2 days time, but hopefully in that time we're going to bring you some more videos and we'll look at the pantry. So this is kind of what I'm calling micro prepping, and I have a small kind of basement that I'm renting from a friend of mine, and I don't really have much space, so I have a little look around there. There's my bed, my TV. That's what's normally the thrift store prepper studio there in my lighting system, and there's my jean jacket that I've managed to wear for 1 day so far this year, because the weather still is yet to be kind to me, although it was beautifully sunny and 23 degrees yesterday afternoon, and Mother Nature's decided to take a shit on the thrift store prepper parade and made it grey, wet and rainy and 13 degrees today. So thanks for that, Mother Nature, and maybe indication of a simulated reality. But back to the pantry. So this is micro prepping, and as you can see, this is something that maybe is not very impressive to most preppers, or some of the channels that you may have seen where their pantry will be as big as this room and resemble a local convenience store. But believe it or not, in this little small space, this filing cabinet that was found on the street, and with this little shelf system that was also found on the street and cost me nothing, with regular little weekly trips and top-ups at the Dollarama and the no-thrill stores, I've managed to put together this little pantry. And in the process of doing so, I come up with the method of sensi's prepping, which we spoke a little bit about in a video a couple of days ago that some of you seem to be liking and appreciating, for the fact that I point out the importance of maybe the nutritional value and the vitamin content and stuff like this in your products. And if you are going to be prepping on a dime and taking the thrift store prepper kind of philosophy and just you know, if we're going to be preparing for an event that may never come, then let's spend as little as possible on that and try and, you know, enjoy the savings in the here and now and put that towards more important things. But having a little food supply, I think, is something that definitely is an important thing for most people to have, in not necessarily for the shit hitting the fan and doomsday, as I've mentioned many times, but for, you know, everyday occurrences that could or could not happen, you know, and the things that we're more realistically likely to encounter in our life than some of these prophecies that you catch on social media, suggesting that there's all kinds of catastrophic events on our way waiting to happen. So the Dollarama and the No Frills are kind of my go-to shops, and I'd say probably 80% of this stuff is from the Dollarama. And the reason I kind of use the dollar store as opposed to places like Walmart or big grocery stores is because I don't really like shopping. I don't like going into these big, cumbersome, confusing type buildings that are, you know, trying to get us to pay in part for more money than we really went in there intending to spend. So with the dollar store, the selection is pretty small. There's only, you know, usually a couple of food aisles, so you haven't really got to be wandering around for long. And a lot of the items that they sell will be the same items over and over. So each and every week, not really much changes. And partly, you know, you get used to how much things cost and what you can get for your money with a little less variety. And most of my stuff is kind of beans and, you know, Boyardee stuff, SpaghettiOs, and I kind of supplemented that with kind of more sensible items from the no frills, like the potatoes and the beans and the soups and stuff like that. But I got some oatmeal. I got about 3 kilograms of oatmeal in here, and some other dry products. I got some couscous. Now, a lot of the items that I am putting into this pantry, because I say I don't have much space, I don't have much money to work with, and I've been a little bit nomadic in the last decade or so, and, you know, sometimes don't really stay in one place that long. You know, I've had places I've been for like maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks, and then I've had places that I've been for a couple of years. But having to up and move around when you don't have money and having to carry lots of things around with you can be quite awkward. And, you know, if you're somebody like myself who lives in a big city and maybe is living in room rentals or has a very small overpriced apartment or studio that they're living in, and, you know, they may not be able to afford and they have to downsize or go to a cheaper part of the city, then having to move pantries and things around it is going to just be added stress to the situation. So this is what I've come up with a micro prep in now. Although I have this little shelf system going on here that I found, I do want to maybe hit a thrift store, check out on the streets if somebody is going to be tossing out something similar to this. Because what I like about it is kind of contained. I can shut the drawers. If I do need to leave, I can just pull the drawers out and stack them into a van or the trunk of a car. And, you know, it's kind of hidden away out of sight. Now, something is a little bit what's the word I'm looking for? Rewarding, heartwarming, or something. I don't know, but something. I noticed a comment earlier from today on another video that I made, that one of my new subscribers and viewers, whose name I forget now. I think it may even be Megan. So Megan mentioned something, and if it wasn't Megan, I apologize. I really am getting, you know, so many people come to this channel. It's hard to keep track of everyone's names, especially the ladies. Anyway, she said that since she started watching my videos, that she's made a little space in a closet in her spare room, and she's going to be using this for her little own kind of micro pantry. So, you know, that's really good stuff, and certainly encouraging for me that the message that I'm sending is going to be working for at least one person, and maybe more than that, when you come to watch my videos and realize the power of the dollar store. But the majority of stuff I'm putting in here in what I'm kind of calling sensi prepping is fail-safe items. Now, these are items that I'd say probably 80% of it I can eat from the packaging or the container, and that's why I've got lots of cans. And in this bag here, this is actually, although it says trail mix, this is ramen noodles that I've repackaged. And, you know, I made a video that only 18 people have watched so far about how to repackage your ramen noodles using recycled packaging that you may have thrown out. In here, there's over 90 and maybe close to 100 packets of ramen noodles. And I've also got the seasoning packets in other Mylar bags that I've reused from my weed purchases in the past. So this drawer here would be the one and only drawer that kind of has things that I would need water for, or water supply for, or to do maybe some kind of cooking, in the sense of the couscous. I'd probably have to boil some water some way. And I've got a lot of instant mashed potatoes, the Betty Crocker instant mash in there, because as I've told you how important potatoes are and that they are a superfood. But all of the items in here will require the minimal amount of water, and I explained a little bit why I took out dried rice and beans from my pantry because of that. And again, if you're in an emergency situation, or maybe you're in a shit hit in the van situation, let's alleviate a little bit of the stress and requirements to go out and have to try and find yourself extra water, or go through the process of having to build a filtration system for that water, and then maybe having to boil all that water. That's just added stress. It's important stuff to know. Don't disregard this stuff, but the less water and the less things you're going to have to try to do in order to survive, the likelihood of your chances of survival will increase. So by just having to open a can or open a bag of ramen, which you do not have to cook, and why I'm telling you ramen noodles over rice and pasta is something I'm going to recommend, not just to low-cost preppers, but to preppers everywhere. Get your ramen noodles and watch my prison recipes, and this is why these items are better for you, in my personal opinion, for emergency situations than your rice, pasta, and couscous and stuff. But I do have some couscous, because it doesn't really take that much. If you just kind of boil the water and pour it over the couscous, it will soak up. And this is something that I can add to soups. I can add in with the water from my beans or potatoes, and thicken it up and add a little bit of more sustenance to the meal that I'm trying to make in an emergency. Excuse me, I'm coughing my lungs up. The mornings are kind of that, I'm a little bit like one of those old classic cars that you have to keep turning the key over and till it starts. But once it's up and running, it will keep going till you get where you need to go. So that's what I'm kind of considering sensi prepping, that it's all low cost items. This is sensible. Keeping it cheap is always going to be sensible in any eventuality or occasion, in my opinion. Cheaper is always better. Keep it fail safe. By fail safe, I mean something that you really aren't going to have to do any further processes or cooking. This stuff, you can just open the can, or in the case of the ramen, open the bag. And you've seen a couple of my videos on the prison recipes and the TSP original ramen recipes. Then all you really need is a sandwich bag, or one of these Ziplocs, or something similar like this, to be able to cooking meals. So you don't have to be starting fires, you don't have to be boiling water. You can just pour the shit in a bag, and you need no cooking experience or skills whatsoever to do these recipes. And I'm going to encourage you, if you do watch these recipes, to try one or two for yourself, and maybe tweak it for your own personal taste, and give me some feedback. Let me know what you think, because you don't knock it until you try it. But that's kind of what I'm trying to say. We keep it cheap, we keep it fail safe, and many of the items that we have are not going to require any more, additional water or requirements in order to make the food. If you have flour and stuff like this, and making bread, and it's just added stuff. And if you're not somebody that has the skills or knowledge to this will just lower your chances possibly of survival, instead of increasing them, if you don't know how to utilize your preps. And why I said anyone can open a can, unless maybe you're Stephen Hawkins, and you probably have a little bit of difficulty. But with his money, he's probably got people that open his cans when he was alive, because obviously he's dead now. But this is kind of what I'm saying. Sensible. Keep it within your realistic realms of affordability and skill capacity. So not everyone's going to be able to cook fancy meals. Not everyone's going to be able to go out and collect water and filter the water and stuff like that. So alleviating as much of this is possible is something I consider sensible. And keeping, basic and simple items again is always going to be sensible items for me. So that's kind of why I do it. And as I said, I'm not really necessarily doing this for the end of days or the shit hitting the fan. But if the shit did hit the fan, then maybe I do have a little bit of more chance of survival with my micro pantry. But over the 11 or so years that I've been living in North America, both sides of the border, I've experienced times when I've been out of work or unable to find a job, and been sick a couple of times, a couple of personal injuries and stuff like this. And I haven't had a pot to piss in or two dimes to rub together in order to do some stuff. I've actually been homeless in that time and was on the streets here in Toronto for a few days before getting myself into a homeless shelter. And being able to buy a bag of ramen and a Slim Jim was able to cook this in a public bathroom, just using the tap for the water supply, kind of put some food in my stomach when I was really just wandering around with a backpack, not knowing what to do with myself. But, I managed to get myself out of a homeless shelter, managed to find myself a job and keep myself in semi-regular employment over the last 6.5 years since I got out of the homeless shelter. But in that time, as I said, work sometimes the hours dry up. I get full-time hours during the summer, and then when the patios and people don't want to be sitting outside as it gets cold here in Canada, the hours at the restaurants and bars that I've worked at in the past have dried up, and I've been on part-time hours and had to feed myself. And this is how I've done so, by going to the dollar store, although not in this capacity or length. And a little while ago when I started the thrift store prep, and I kind of explained briefly in a previous video how this all went about, that I kind of was talking about how I shop at the dollar store and how this is a great place for prepping items and prepping essentials on a budget, to and a friend of mine who is my moderator at the Facebook group and gives me a little bit of feedback in information on this channel. Michelle, if you're watching, thanks for all you've done, and you were kind of the inspiration and partly the reason that this all became and started and become a thing. And with the advice I gave to Michelle and the advice that she took, and then feedback that she gave to me, that for a couple of $100 that she spent, she managed to put maybe 2 or 3 months worth of food for emergency purposes for her mother. And it was the emergency supplies for her mum that she was worried about, and how much it was going to cost and how little she was getting for her dollar, that led me to give her this information. But up until that point, I never really prepped. I never had a pantry. About the most I kept at any time was maybe a week's worth of food, and that would just be something very simple, like a couple of cans of boyardee, some chili, and in ramen. And from my time that I was locked up down in Southern California for those 6 months, it seems so very much longer and was so very damaging. Ramen noodle become something that I lived off of daily. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, perhaps, of how I survived prison or not prison, jail and immigration prison on ramen noodles. But ramen become something that was a staple of most inmates' diet, and one of the, something that I'm guessing every prisoner in North America is living on, and probably at this moment in time mashing themselves up a little bit of spread in the dormitory. But ramen noodles and beans and these kind of things, or what I kind of consider somewhat prison commissary items, because this is kind of a little bit of stuff that prisoners and inmates will be able to purchase to feed themselves on the inside at an extremely marked up price. But inmates in prison, they do not have refrigerators, they do not have freezers, they do not have pantries, they do not have pots, cookers, stoves, kettles, or anything. They just are stripped of absolutely all human kind of comforts completely, and are offered only a very, very basic food supply to supplement them from the shit that they get served in the slop house or the chow house. And it was the ingenuity and the creativity of how these inmates used ramen to make so many things. It kind of really kind of was impressive in a very, very stressful and traumatic situation for me. And since I've left that situation and been a free person, prison ramen and these kinds of noodles are something strangely I find myself craving, and have quite often relied on to keep myself fed during times of hardship. But at the moment, I've got a good job that I actually enjoy and have some decent people that I work with, as I am a chef and a cook and work in the kitchen. Partly the gig is you will be able to eat for free, so I eat pretty well each week, so I'm not going hungry. But when I'm not at work, the last thing in the world I really want to be doing is looking in a kitchen, looking at a food, and certainly cooking for myself when you've been doing it for maybe 50 or 60 hours all week long for hundreds, sometimes thousands of other people. Cooking for yourself isn't something you really want to be doing. And this is probably the same reasons I actually give up my intended career in gynecology. But the prepping pantry is something that I started along with this channel at the same time, and this channel has kind of been a bit of a vlog of how this pantry was when I started, pretty much empty and only had a couple of ramen and some beans in it, to now being pretty stocked and stacked with what I consider sensi prepping, and the trials and errors that I've had in with this as I started this project, the thrift store prepper, and up until now is something I've has been a learning curve for me, and maybe for the people who are watching, you might be going through that learning curve. So maybe watch me, maybe do some of the things I do, maybe take some advice and not do some of the things I may have done wrong in your eyes. But there's no wrong or right way to be prepping, and prepping is all down to personal preference and experience and reasoning. So I'm not going to tell you the ways you're doing it up until now are wrong. I'm not telling you the ways that I'm doing it here are right and you should stop doing it the way you're doing. I'm just offering people some alternatives and, judging by some of the comments, some advice that has been overlooked, certainly in terms of the water needed for the rice and beans to cook in an emergency situation. Had a couple of people mention that they never even thought of that, and this is why I'm saying keep it sensy, keep it simple, keep it cheap. All this stuff here I can pretty much eat from the can or the package. I don't need to be cooking or any additional waters. Now, maybe in what I have here, I went from having maybe a couple of weeks worth of food when I first started this project to maybe able to stretch this out for 3, 4, maybe 5 months if I really had to. But that would be kind of extremely rationing things in the ladder at that. But certainly for around 3 months, I'm going to be able to live off of what I have in this very small space. And maybe you too could have a small pantry that you could live for 3 or so months off of by following the thrift store prepper steps. So that's a little bit more about it, a little bit more about the thrift store prepper and kind of why I do this. And this is what I consider everyday prepping. We're not going to fear porn you or give you the doom and gloom doomsday scenario and say you're going to die if you don't shop at the dollar store, and 90% of you won't last the shit of that fan if you're not watching my videos, like some prepping channels will be telling you. And with a little regards to that, some of you are noticing that maybe I have a little bit of a wicked sense of humor, and are finding a couple of my videos a little bit funny. So if anyone would be interested in hearing a thrift store prepper roast of a yuppie white collar pretender prepper, then let me know in the comments. Maybe that's something we could even bring you by the end of the day. But this is my micro pantry. This has been a video about sensi prepping, and it's been a shit video production for the thrift store prepper. So hope you've liked this, thrift fam, and we'll catch you next time. And as always, keep it thrifty.